Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fifth seminar of the standardized program titled The Foods for Specified Health Uses FOSHU Approval System in Japan. Today, we will be learning about the FOSHU approval system, which is a functional food regulation system in Japan. We will learn how the system works and see some examples of different FOSHU products. We will also get to learn about some other functional food claims that can be made in Japan. After that, we will talk about FOSHU compares with FDA system in the US, as well as we will compare with functional food centers proposed system for regulating functional food in the USA. This offers useful comparisons that can help you better understand the various roles of functional food in different regulation system. This seminar presentation was done by Sadohara, a past intern who is a PhD student at Michigan State University. Actually, she already completed her PhD and she is now working in Japan. She also wrote the article for this seminar along with me, which is titled Functional Food Centers Vision on Functional Food Definition and Science in Comparison to FDA's Health Claim Authorization and Japan's Food for Specified Health Uses. And the article was published, so you will see information about that in slides. So later on you can read that full article if you would like. Also, I would like to remind you that our seminars are completely free, but those who would like to become a certified functional food scientist or functional food professional, they should make a payment for the course to be able to get access to all course materials as well as to the exams. So next I will turn it over to Stella, who will share today's schedule and show the video. Thank you. Please, Stella, continue.
All right, thank you. So hi, everyone. The schedule is in the chat. So the video is around 20 minutes long. So we'll watch the video first. Then I have some extra slides that I'd like to add at the end to present. Then we have around 5 minutes for any questions or comments. And then as usual, we'll go through the poll where you'll get to try out some of our quiz questions and then go over answers at the end. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen and we'll start with watching the seminar presentation.
Today, I am going to talk about FOSHU, Foods for Specified Food Uses Approval System in Japan. As previous presenters mentioned, this system is kind of famous in Japan, and I'm originally from Japan, so that's why. And so for today, I am going to discuss the classification of foods with health claims, FOSHU foods for specified health uses. That is my main focus today. The current number of FOSHU approved products, the approval process, and I'll show you an example product. And I will touch upon some other categories of foods with health claims as well. Okay, so foods are classified into general foods and foods with health claims, and they are different from medicine. General foods can have no health claims. Foods with health claims are foods for specified health uses, that is the well-known FOSHU. And there are also foods with nutrient function claims and foods with function claims, which is relatively new, started in 2015. It's foods for specified health uses that I focus on today. It's a government-approved process, labeling system, and there are 5 categories of it. So a little bit more about this. FOSHU labeling system started in 1991, so it's been around for almost 30 years now. It is deemed as a robust and thorough evaluation system. there are 1,072 approved products by 153 companies from October 1997 to April 2020. And as I said before, there are 5 categories within FOSHU. Information on each approved product is publicly available at the website of the information system on safety and effectiveness for health foods, which is in Japanese. FOSHU approved products have this so-called jumping to health person logo that says approved by the Consumers Affairs Agency and will specify the This logo differentiates FOSHU products from all kinds of foods to other kinds of foods. I said earlier, there are 153 companies that produce FOSHU approved products. The composition of the companies are many one-timers, a few regulars, and one giant. This chart shows the count of companies by the number of FOSHU approved products they produce. Over 130 companies have only 1 to 10 approved products. In fact, the majority of them only have one or 2. There are a few companies that have 11 to 50 FOSHU approved products. They include big food and beverage companies. Then there is one giant company, Toyo Shinyaku, that have 259 FOSHU approved products. So this is one giant. There are 5 categories of FOSHU. Regular ones, which are applicable to any compound in theory and go through the full evaluation process. Standardized FOSHU can only be granted to products that contain a certain compound with a specific amount and of a product category all specified by CAA, the Consumers Affairs Agency. The specified compounds are dietary fiber, certain oligosaccharides, and resistant dextrine. So other compounds are not applicable. The efficacy and safety evaluation is omitted because there is already a large body of knowledge on the safety and efficacy of those specific compounds. So the approval process will be faster for those. The authorized approval is granted to products that were already approved with minor changes in product names and flavors. This will take a short time too, because the product itself is already approved. Risk reduction FOSHU labeling only applies to calcium and folate. For those two compounds, it's possible to mention risk reduction. I will discuss that more later. Finally, qualified approval is granted when the efficacy is not as strong but suggestive. This is similar to qualified approval by the FDA in the US, and the FOSHU logo will say qualified across this person, unlike other 4 FOSHU approvals. So this line chart shows the number of approvals granted to each category of FOSHU from 1997 to 2019. Regular FOSHU, which is in blue, there are less approvals in recent years, ranging from 10 to 20 approvals per year. Reauthorized and standardized FOSHU are fluctuating, and there are only a small number of risk reduction FOSHU, which only pertains to calcium and folate. And there have been only 1 qualified FOSHU so far. So for FOSHU approval, the active compound and effective dosage must be known, except for qualified FOSHU. FOSHU foods are defined as foods containing ingredient with functions for health and officially approved to claim its physiological effects on the human body. And this ingredient refers to the bioactive compounds that gives a health benefit. So in order to get a FOSHU approval, you would need to first identify the active compound, conduct a preliminary study to determine an appropriate dosage of the compound, and then carry out an efficacy trial with humans without optimum dosage. It is quite a long and labor-intensive work. And this is different from FDA, which does not require the identification of bioactive compounds necessarily. Also, no risk reduction claims are allowed for FOSHU, except for the risk reduction FOSHU, which is limited to calcium and folate. FOSHU is intended to be consumed for the maintenance and promotion of health for specific health uses, for example, blood pressure or blood cholesterol. In other words, disease risk reduction claims are not allowed except calcium and folate, which are deemed to have substantial evidence for disease risk reduction. So your FOSHU label can say, this helps to maintain normal blood pressure, or this helps reduce the absorption of fatty acid. But you cannot have labels that say, this improves high blood pressure, or this prevents cardiovascular events, because you cannot mention specific disease names. This is another difference from FDA regulation, which allows disease risk reduction claims, but not mitigate or cure. There are many requirements for FOSHU approval. First, effectiveness on humans needs to be clearly proven. For safety, animal toxicity tests and excess intake tests with humans are necessary. The product needs to use nutritionally appropriate ingredients only, so you cannot use an excessive amount of salt in your product, for example. And your product cannot contain alcohol either. And it's also required that the product specification is guaranteed at the time of consumption. This means the amount of bioactive compound on the label needs to be the same as the amount which is consumed. Finally, established quality control methods at the production facility of the product is required. And you need to prove all of this to the CAA, the government agency. So there are so many requirements and a lot of documents are needed to even apply for FOSHU. First, you need to prove the effectiveness in humans. So the intervention should be at least 12 weeks long in randomized controlled design, show statistically significant differences between the treatment and control groups, and the results need to be published in a peer-reviewed journal. You also need safety data in vitro and in vivo. That is an animal test and then a human test. Excuse me. The excess intake should be at least 3 times the minimum effective dosage for at least 12 weeks. A literature review on the safety of the compound should also be submitted. About the stability of the products, you need to submit a document about the characteristics of the bioactive compound, as well as a shelf life study that was used to set a best before date. The mode of action of the compound via in vitro and in vivo tests need to be submitted as well. Quantification methods and the analytical assay results by a third party of the compound are needed. And you also need a nutrient and energy content. It is a nutrition label, foods, and the production method of the product with factory equipment and a quality control system in place that guarantees that the bioactive compound is contained in your product. Now let me show you the approval process of FOSHU. There are many players involved: an applicant, Consumers Affairs Agency, CAA, a government body, Consumers Commission, Food Safety Commission, and the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare. And finally, the National Institute of Biomedical Innovation, Health and Nutrition. First, an applicant, a company, submits application to CAA with all the necessary documents. Then CAA requests evaluation on the product to these three organizations. And then they return evaluation results. Meanwhile, the applicant requests analysis on their sample products to the National Institute of Biomedical Innovation, Health and Nutrition. They quantify the bioactive compound in the sample and return the results to the applicant, who will then submit it to CAA. With all results satisfactory, CAA grants approval to the products made by this applicant. So this is a product-specific process, and an approval is given to individual products by a specific company. So this is the fun part. I have an example of FOSHU approved product, Suntory Tokucha Jasmine Tea. It was approved on January 22nd, 2020, quite recently. Its active compound is isoquercetin, and 110 milligrams of it is in a 500 milliliter bottle of this jasmine tea. Its approved claim says, this product helps decrease body fat due to isoquercetin glucoside, which activates lipase. Therefore, it is suited to people with slightly high body fat. An efficacy study was conducted with 200 participants taking 110 milligrams of isoquercetin for 12 weeks, and the total fat area and visceral fat area were significantly reduced in the treatment group. This study was used also as a long-term safety study, and another study was conducted with 48 participants taking 480 milligrams of isoquercetin for 4 weeks as an excessive intake study. And it's sold in supermarkets and convenience stores where you find general foods, and it's sold for about 160 yen or 1.5 US dollars. So it's not expensive at all. And this has this FOSHU approved logo. So here are key points of FOSHU, foods for specified health uses. It's a product-specific government-approved system for functional foods in Japan. Health claims are for the maintenance of health only, not for risk reduction, except for risk reduction FOSHU that pertains to only calcium and folate. It requires high standard for the safety, efficacy, and quality of approved products. The bioactive compound and mode of action must be known, except for qualified FOSHU. The appropriate daily dosage must be determined, and there are 5 categories: regular, standardized, risk reduction, reauthorized, and qualified. FOSHU products have the logo of Jumping to Health person. For qualified FOSHU that has only a suggested evidence needs to say qualified in the middle of this logo, unlike the other 4 categories. Okay, going back to the first figure, there are 2 more categories aside from FOSHU: foods with nutrient function claims and foods with function claims, which is relatively new, started in 2015. Those 2 are quite similar, but the keyword is nutrient with this one. I'll touch on these quickly. Foods with nutrient function claims only applies to certain nutrients, namely N3 fatty acids, minerals, and vitamins. FNSFC labeling can be freely used without any approval, as long as the nutrient content is in between the lower and upper intake limits set by the government, and the labeling meets government guidelines. So there is a long list of nutrients that can be used for this labeling with the upper and lower intake limit and functionality, just like this table, but this is much longer. And the nutrient in your products must be within the limits, and you must have a label that describes the functionality as well. This labeling only allows nutrient description, so no health claims are allowed. Again, showing you an example of FNFC products. So this is different from FOSHU. It is a brown rice biscuit with cream sandwiched, flavored cream sandwiched. In front, it says a food with nutrient function claim, specifically calcium and iron. On the back are nutrient descriptions, which says calcium is a nutrient necessary for teeth and bone formation, and iron is a nutrient necessary for red blood cell formation. Finally, you need to say that this product is different from FOSHU, which is individually evaluated by CAA to prevent confusion by consumers. The last one is foods with function claims, which started in 2015. It requires registration only, so no validation or approval is given by government agencies. Food companies submit documents on the safety and effectiveness of the active compound to CAA in their product, and it can be either a systematic review or clinical trial. Information on all registered products are publicly available at the CAA website, and consumers can look up products if they want to know more about them. As many as 3,172 products have already been registered as of August 18th, 2020. The advantage of this system is that it's faster because there is no evaluation by the government involved, and you can do a clinical trial or a systematic review. If there is already plenty of evidence on your bioactive compounds, you won't have to reinvent the wheels, so to speak. The final example, an example of foods with function claims is a gum with a function claim to maintain memory for the middle-aged and the elderly. It says food with a function claim and the bioactive compound ginkgo leaf extract. In the back, it says this product contains ginkgo flavonoid glycoside and terpene lactone, which are reported to maintain memory, the ability to memorize words or shapes in middle-aged and elderly people. Finally, again, you need to say that this product is different from FOSHU, which is individually evaluated by CAA to prevent confusion by consumers. The individual packaging of this gum lets you practice memorize the shape and color. Found it quite interesting. So the take-home message is that foods with health claims stand in between general foods and medicine. For FOSHU, the government evaluates the safety and efficacy and gives a unique logo. There are 5 different categories of FOSHU. Foods with nutrient function claims apply to certain nutrients only, and no health claims are allowed. For foods with function claims, which started in 2015, companies evaluate the efficacy and safety. So this concludes my presentation on the functional food system in Japan. Thank you.
All right, so now I'm going to go over to the additional slides that I added and spend a couple of minutes talking through them. Thank you for the introduction. Okay. Yeah, so just now, you guys heard a lot about the FOSHU system and how it works. So now how does it compare to other food regulation systems around the world? So first is a comparison of FOSHU with the FDA system in the US. Okay, so since FOSHU is for functional foods and the FDA doesn't actually officially recognize functional foods yet, there are significant differences between these two systems. So first of all, for FOSHU, the product needs to have an active ingredient that is characterized chemically, biologically, and physically. And the mechanism of action for this active ingredient must also be known and characterized. Whereas under the FDA system, this active ingredient does not need to be characterized at a molecular level, and its mechanism of action also does not need to be known. So the requirements for what information to provide about the active ingredient is much more lax currently under the FDA. Then as for the health claims themselves, FOSHU makes approvals based on a product by product basis, whereas the FDA does it on a claims-based basis. So they authorize products based off of the food to disease relationship. So they pay more attention to the food themselves rather than on the specific product. Then as for the source of literature, both sides definitely require scientific evidence, but the nature of the evidence differs a little bit. So FOSHU requires evidence on the efficacy, safety of the product, as well as other requirements, while the FDA primarily collects literature about the substance and disease relationship. And the manufacturer will also need to provide a disclaimer if this is a qualified claim, saying that more evidence between the food and the disease needs to be given. Yeah, and for FOSHU also does allow for qualified approvals, and these are for products that fall short of the regular FOSHU standard requirements. Okay. And then next, I'm going to compare the systems for FOSHU and the Functional Food Center's proposed system for functional foods. So since both of these systems regulate functional foods, there are a lot of similarities between the two, but there are still some significant differences here and there. So I'm going to go through them. So first of all, as I said before, FOSHU requires active ingredients in their functional food products with established mechanisms, characteristics, and stability. And then the Functional Food Center, or the FFC, also requires something similar. And the main difference is that we refer to active ingredients as bioactive compounds instead. Then both systems also require for an establishment of a bioactive mechanism and an establishment of dosage and non-toxic quantities for the bioactive compound. Then for both systems, the active ingredient or the bioactive compound must be identified and measurable in the product. And the FFC is just a little bit more specific with these requirements. So if there is more than one bioactive compound in the product that's responsible for the health benefits, then the ratio of these compounds must also be given. Then these two systems also use slightly different wordings and definitions for the terminology that they use. So for example, FOSHU refers to bioactive compounds as active ingredients, and it currently does not have an official definition under the system. And then functional foods under FOSHU are referred to as foods with health claims. So in the FFC system, we refer to these as bioactive compounds, as functional foods, and we have our own unique and formal definitions for these. Then as for what the products can be used for, so FOSHU and FFC functional food products can be used for maintaining general health or for people with special health conditions. However, the main difference is that under the FOSHU system, you cannot mention disease names. The exceptions for that were for products that contain calcium or folate. Otherwise, if these products don't contain those active ingredients, you cannot mention disease names or disease risk reduction claims. Whereas for FFC, you can mention diseases such as a product can reduce the risk of a viral disease, for example. Then moving on, both systems require evaluation of the delivery vehicle that will deliver the bioactive compound with each new functional food product. And this is because each new product will be a new environment, which may affect the bioactive compound's mechanism and activities. So under both systems, this will need to be evaluated as well. And as for the ideal intervention periods, FOSHU requires 12 weeks of randomized controlled trials. It can be a little bit less if justifiable, while FFC requires 90 to 120 days at least of randomized controlled trials. So both of these systems require substantial time for studies to be done to evaluate the efficacy and safety of these products. Then both systems also require some sort of indicator or biomarker that can be linked back to the bioactive compound, and that can be used to indicate whether the bioactive compound is effective. And then both studies, or both systems, require in vitro, in vivo, and clinical studies for approval. And both also requires a specialized label that you will put on the final functional food product to inform consumers of what this product is, what it does, and how to use it safely and correctly. So for example, the special FOSHU label has a couple of mandatory items to include on there, including the product name, ingredients, consumption instructions, dosages, and the approved health claim. And FFC will also have its own list of requirements of information to include on the label, including information on the intake and consumption guidelines and recommendations, as well as shelf life of the functional food product, among other information to include. And another significant difference between the FOSHU and FFC systems is about epidemiological studies. So while FOSHU does require for companies to collect new scientific information on their product, even after approval, and report things like adverse health outcomes or contradictory information, FOSHU does not actually require epidemiological studies to be done. But under the FFC system, epidemiological studies and after-market research are required to confirm a functional food product's effects in an uncontrolled consumption setting. And this is important for ensuring the safety, efficacy, and consistency of the product in large and diverse populations. And if any changes need to be made based off of these studies, then it will be added to the label afterwards. So in short, epidemiological studies are required under the FFC system, but is not strictly required under FOSHU. Then both systems will require government approval for the functional food product. And finally, there are many beneficiaries for the functional food products, such as the scientists who come up with a product, manufacturers, government, and consumers. Yeah, so these are the extra slides that I have. And before we go on to the last part of today, are there any questions or comments?
Let's see. Okay, look like we don't have yet any question. Any comments, please? Yeah, so until you can think about, so let me tell you that I think it Ria mentioned about that investigations then should be published, but certainly it should be published not in any place, but published in journals, which is about functional food, healthy food. So that way probably we have in more than 25-30% of our publications we getting from Japan. So certainly publication is very important, because without that it's going to be very difficult to confirm that that you have really some functional food with bioactive compound and dosage and etc. Of course, presenting on international conferences also, it's usually very, very helpful. Then one other comment is that we asking about epidemiological studies, but this is not absolutely required. So could be the level which is not the best one as a functional food could be without epidemiological studies and without aftermarket studies. And here, at the time when we worked with RIA, so a year ago, we did not spoke about much about aftermarket studies, so it wasn't mentioned here. But actually, it's not only epidemiological studies, but aftermarket studies also. It's very important. So we already mentioned several times in our previous seminars. So now look like we have some questions. Let's see. Nice presentation. Thank you. Very nice presentation. is a minimum amount of scientific publication supporting the in vitro and in vivo benefits of the new FFP for the FOSHU certification? Yeah, it is a difficult question. So we don't know really how many publications. So I think depend from publication, but mostly what I can see from publication from a Japanese scientist, mostly on they publish in a big article, not short one, so with lots of data in there. So they try and put it all together in one good research article. So everything they're trying to prove and put in one paper. So I don't know if there is need several papers. So that probably depend. Okay, so then another question. Would you like to add anything, Stella?
Yeah, just for the previous question. Yeah, I'm not totally sure if there is a minimum amount of scientific publications. This really just depends on the discretion of the committees that are evaluating the product. What's really more important is that the publications that are available meet the requirements or the standards for FOSHU approval, such as the length of the study, for example. Yeah.
Okay. So then from Rocky Campus, Vega, so she asking, always needed in vitro and in vivo studies previously to the human trials. So answer is certainly yes. Before doing any human trial, certainly you should be done in vivo and in vitro studies, because without establishing dosage, without establishing which bioactive compound you have, so then how are you gonna do that in human trials? Certainly, it's very important to have those. And there is some difficulty actually when you have a dosage for any bioactive molecule. So then it is not always easy. Simply say there is if you're done on mice. So then multiplying that how big is now another subject or a human. So that's something else. So we have to always think about. But yes, answer is certainly we have to have a in vivo and in vitro studies before you can start human trials. Okay, so look like we don't have any other questions, so we can move to the next step.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for your questions, everyone. Okay, so the next part, we're going to do review questions. So if you are in our standardized program, you will need to know these questions and answers for the quizzes and the final. And if you're not in our standardized program, that's fine. You can try out these questions for fun to reinforce what we just talked about during the past few minutes. So I'm going to share the poll, and we can meet back up in around 5 minutes. So at 10:16. All right, hi everyone. So it's now 10:16. I'm gonna end the poll now and share the results. So thank you for participating. Okay. Yep, so the results are shared right now. And let me share my screen again. Okay, so number one, the answer is B. So in 2015, the Foods with Function Claims labeling system was introduced in Japan in order to ease the financial burden many small businesses face during the FOSHU application process. So as you may probably remember from Ree's presentation, the Foods with Function Claim system is the one that allows for the manufacturers to evaluate their own product. So businesses don't have to go through the whole bureaucratic and lengthy, expensive process of providing all the documentation and studies to the government for evaluation and approval. So this is beneficial for small businesses who may have more limited financial resources. And number 2, answer to this is C. So by the Functional Food Standard standards, a functional food must aid in all of the following except. So we actually do want functional foods to aid in general health, chronic diseases, and reducing the risk of contracting viral diseases. But functional foods are not intended to reduce prescription medicine intake. The Functional Food Center actually wants functional foods to be used together with Western medicine. So we're not trying to replace Western medicine with functional foods. Rather, they should be used together. So that's why C is the answer. And number 3, the approval process for FOSHU involves which of the 6 parties? So the answer to this is D, the applicant, CAA, Consumers Commission, Food Safety Commission, MHLW, and NIB-IHN. And you can see that on this next slide. This was used in the seminar too, and these are all of the agencies that are involved in FOSHU approval. All right, so number 4, under FOSHU regulations, a substance is classified as a food or food component. Therefore, an active ingredient may not be identified if the food product has an authorized health claim. So this is false. It's actually the opposite. An active ingredient is essential for the food product to get its health claim, since the active ingredient is mainly the ingredient that's responsible for the product's health effects. All right, so number 5, based on the Functional Food Center process, research and development of functional foods includes all except. So the answer to this is A. We do not require a scientific literature review from the applicant, but the bioactive compound does need to be identified, since that is the compound that is responsible for the product's health effects. Proper dosages are also super important, so consumers know how to use the product safely and effectively. And then animal and human trials to evaluate safety and dosages and efficacy also need to be provided. Okay, and then 6, authorization for health claims is granted by the FDA to each food and disease relationship, making it a claim-based process. So yeah, that's true. So FDA evaluates more of the food itself and how it's related to the disease it's supposed to prevent. So it's a claim-based process, whereas FOSHU was the one with the product-based process where they evaluated, where they gave approvals on a product-by-product basis. Okay, and then number 7, the FOSHU risk reduction label is given only to, answer to this is D, calcium and folate. So these are the only 2 active ingredients that can be included in a product and that can be associated with disease risk reduction labels. And then finally, one of the roles the MHLW plays in the FOSHU application process is validating the analytical method used by the applicant and the concentration of the active ingredient in the product. So this one is false. The agency that is responsible for this is the NIB-IHN. So going back to this slide, it's here, the National Institute of Biomedical Innovation, Health and Nutrition. So they're the ones that are responsible for quantifying the bioactive compound. And I believe the MHLW, or the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, is more concerned with the final labeling of the product. Okay, so are there any last questions on any of these?
Look like we don't have any questions yet.
Okay. Then yeah, if you guys have any other questions that come up after the seminar, you can feel free to email us. Here's our email. And yeah, next week we'll have another seminar again at the same time. I believe the topic will be about Fibrosol 2. This is going to be a seminar that's about a specific functional food product that's been approved under the FOSHU system, which we just learned about today. And it'll be a live presentation.
Okay, great. So then thanks so much, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye.
All right, thank you.